Boscombe Beach near sunny Bournemouth, where we'll be joined by the most successful British winter Olympian and the most successful Olympic skeleton athlete of all time. I know, Lizzie Yarnold. So pack a few sandwiches, maybe a wind cheater just in case, and we'll see you there. Until next time, happy listening and goodbye.
The Listening Project Summer Special was presented by Fee Glover and produced by Mohini Patel. In an hour from now, we find out how voguing, a dance form with origins in the Harlem ballroom scene, is enjoying a resurgence amongst a new and politicised generation here in the UK. Get ready to bust some shapes at 11. Before that, we're standing by for The World Tonight with Rita Lashar. That's coming up shortly, not before the weather. And for most, there'll be plenty of clear spells tonight. It could get quite cool overnight in some rural spots in the southeast. It'll be cloudier in the west, especially in Northern Ireland and western Scotland, with cloud thickening further here through the night. Shetland will have some showers. Tomorrow, many areas will have sunny spells and only a few patches of cloud. Northern and western areas will see some scattered showers, however. On Wednesday, northern and western areas will see further showers, some of them heavy, elsewhere dry with sunny spells and very patches of cloud. On Thursday, showery rain will clear from England and Wales.
It's 10 o'clock. Good evening. This is The World Tonight with Rita Lashar. President Trump has stepped up his attack on 4 opposition congresswomen despite accusations that his comments are racist. We hear one of the few voices of disapproval from his own party.
This is offensive, it's vile, it shouldn't be said, and it's incumbent on Republican elected officials, particularly the leadership, to stand up and say something, and I'm disappointed they haven't yet.
The EU says Iran's breaches of the nuclear deal aren't significant and can still be reversed. The studies found that anorexia isn't just a mental illness but also has physical causes. And as the first person tests positive for Ebola in one of the DRC's biggest cities, is this a dangerous game changer?
The world has a choice. We could try and deal with this problem relatively quickly. If we don't do that, what we're going to find is we're dealing with this problem for a long time, and it will be more expensive, and more people will get the disease and not survive it.
Later in the programme, what's your problem?
My friend has just completely abused my friendship in what she's asked me to do with her cat sitting situation, and so I just wanted to talk to Virginia about how to approach the situation.
What would you ask an agony aunt? That's all after the BBC News, read tonight by Neil Nunes.
President Trump has rejected accusations that he was being racist. He said 4 opposition party congresswomen should go back to where they came from. Instead, Mr. Trump has stepped up his attack on them, saying they hate the United States. From Washington, Ali Maqbool has this report.
Donald Trump's been unrepentant about his original statements, where he told the congresswomen, none of whom is white, to, in his words, go back and help fix the broken and crime-infested places from which they came. Though 3 of the 4 Democrats he's talking about were born in the US, one African-American, one of Puerto Rican descent, and another with a Palestinian background, he's denied he was being racist. In fact, he's reiterated those sentiments, saying if someone has a problem with our country, they should leave, and even said that the 4th politician, Ilhan Omar, who fled war in Somalia, loved Al-Qaeda. Republicans have been slow to distance themselves from the president's racist rhetoric. It's been a persistent dilemma for the party as to whether it speaks out, but then risks alienating itself from Trump's base.
Both Conservative leadership candidates criticized Mr. Trump's comments tonight, but stopped short of describing them as racist. Boris Johnson and Jeremy Hunt were taking part in a debate in London, hosted by The Sun newspaper and Talk Radio. Our political correspondent Chris Mason reports from the event.
Boris Johnson has until now stopped short of directly and explicitly criticising President Trump in this campaign. Tonight, both he and Jeremy Hunt were unequivocal in their condemnation of his remarks over the weekend, but both too stopped short of describing them as racist. You simply cannot use that kind of language. That went out decades and decades ago, Boris Johnson said, concluding the comments were totally unacceptable. Jeremy Hunt said he had 3 half-Chinese children, and if anyone ever said to them, go back to China, he would be utterly appalled.
Labour has announced that there'll be a meeting of the Shadow Cabinet next Monday to discuss the handling of complaints of anti-Semitism. Jeremy Corbyn is then expected to address the parliamentary party, which has been talking about the issue this evening. Here's our political correspondent Ian Watson.
Jeremy Corbyn has been under increasing pressure to reform the way Labour deals with complaints about anti-Semitism following allegations on the Panorama programme that officials in his office interfered with the process. Tonight there was strong support at the parliamentary party for those former members of Labour's staff who spoke to the BBC about their concerns. They'd been denounced as disaffected by the party's official spokespeople, an approach described as disgraceful by a Jewish MP. The shadow Brexit Secretary, Sir Keir Starmer, was the main speaker, and he called for more transparency in the system, warning his senior colleagues not to circle the wagons on the issue.
The EU's foreign policy chief Federica Mogherini has played down the importance of Iran's recent breaches of the international nuclear deal. After a meeting of EU ministers in Brussels, including the Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt, she said the lack of compliance so far was not significant. Alan Johnston has this report.
In recent weeks, Iran has violated certain limits agreed under the nuclear accord, including how much enriched uranium it can store. But the EU's top diplomat, Ms. Mogherini, says the Europeans don't see these breaches as being very serious. They won't yet consider abandoning the accord. This has infuriated the Israeli leader, Benjamin Netanyahu, who's likened Europe's approach to the appeasement of Nazi Germany. Last year, President Trump tore up the nuclear agreement and then imposed sanctions on Iran. It's now starting to renege on the accord in retaliation.
The Congolese authorities are to begin vaccinating people who came into contact with a pastor who tested positive for Ebola. In the city of Goma, it's the first time the disease has been detected in an urban area a year after the outbreak began. It has killed more than 1,600 people. New research suggests that anorexia is partly a metabolic disorder and not just a psychiatric condition. Doctors at King's College London have discovered that changes in DNA which alter the way fats and sugars are processed may make it easier for some people to starve their bodies. Our health and science correspondent James Gallagher has more details.
Anorexia is an eating disorder that leads people to lose dangerous amounts of weight. For the past few decades, it's been seen as a serious psychiatric disease, but this study in Nature Genetics suggests its origins are even more complex. Researchers analysed DNA from more than 72,000 people. They found mutations that were far more common in anorexia patients. Some mutations did affect brain function, but others were found in the instructions that control the body's metabolism, particularly around blood sugar levels and body fat. The suggestion that the origin of anorexia is in both the mind and the body has been described as groundbreaking by the eating disorder charity Beat.
Theresa May has told the England men's cricket team that their World Cup victory showed sport at its best. At a Downing Street reception, the Prime Minister said they had shown courage and skill to beat New Zealand. The players met young fans at the Oval earlier in the day, and England's Joe Root said the team hopes to inspire more cricketers.
We're trying to do everything we can to widen the reach of it. As a team, we talk about leaving the game in a better place when we finish and trying to take it forward all the time, and feel like the way we've gone about things this World Cup hopefully has done that and given an opportunity for the next generation to see what we've achieved and hopefully want to go on and emulate it.
The face of the Second World War code breaker Alan Turing is to feature on the Bank of England's new £50 note. The mathematician, who played a key role in cracking the Nazis' Enigma code, went on to develop electronic computers, programming, and theories about artificial intelligence.
Thank you, Neil. You're listening to The World Tonight with Ritula Shah. President Trump doesn't like to back down. Under fire, his instinct is usually to reject any criticism and double down on the target of his attack. And so it was today, as the president escalated the row over comments he made about 4 Democratic congresswomen that have been widely condemned as racist. Mr. Trump tweeted on Sunday that the 4 should go back to the countries they came from, and has now added that the women should apologize to him and the United States for things they've said. The women are all ethnically diverse American citizens. 3 are US-born: Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib and Ayanna Pressley, while Ilhan Omar came to the US as a refugee aged 12. They all called the president racist and were backed by members of the Democratic Party. Speaking at an event at the White House today, Mr. Trump accused the congresswomen of being anti-American and for loving the enemies of the United States.
These are people that hate our country. They hate our country. They hate it, I think, with a passion. Now, it's possible I'm wrong. The voter will decide. But when I hear the way they talk about our country, when I hear the anti-Semitic language they use, when I hear the hatred they have for Israel, and the love they have for enemies like Al-Qaeda, then you know what? I will tell you that I do not believe this is good for the Democrat Party. Certainly it's not the party that I've known over the years.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, one of the targets of the president's tweets, gave her reaction this evening.
It's unfortunate that he feels the way he feels about people of color in this country. It's unfortunate the way he feels about immigrants, naturalized citizens or not, in this country. He relies on racism, division, and anti-immigrant sentiment to consolidate power because he does not have a positive vision for the future of America. There's a strategy to divide the country because the more this country is divided, the more he benefits from it.
So is she right? Do comments like the ones he made last night play well to President Trump's base? Taylor Griffin is a Republican strategist and a former Treasury advisor to President George W. Bush. He's on the line now. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Taylor Griffin, what effect do you think comments like this have on President Trump's base?
On his base, there is a certain trend among his base of people who get a little exhausted by the Twitter fights. At the same time, Trump's support isn't broad, but it is deep. And Trump supporters will tend to interpret his comments like this in the most charitable way possible. No, it's not racist. He was saying, go back to your countries and then come back here and show us how it's done. And focus on those comments in the second and third in that series of tweets that got him in so much trouble. So it's hard to see it changing a lot of things. People have invested a lot as Trump supporters in their support of President Trump, and a tweet like this probably isn't going to change a lot of minds a whole lot. But go ahead.
Go on.
What he needs to be concerned about is the independent voters, the people who are sort of casual Republicans who may be willing to vote for him because the economy is strong, but see stuff like this and are really disgusted by it.
So in which case, though, why are Republicans, the vast majority of Republicans, scared to speak out? The criticism from his own side has been muted at best.
Well, I think when you talk about Republican congressmen especially, their most important electoral challenge is a primary. And President Trump remains very strong in his support among the Republican base. And a lot of these members of Congress don't want to speak out and to say something that would potentially be used against them in a primary from another Republican who maybe supports Trump more strongly.
Do you think, in a sense, this was all normalized early on in President Trump's presidency when there were those protests led by white supremacists in Charlottesville, and President Trump at the time said, I think there is blame on both sides?
Well, I think that a lot of people are really exhausted by this whole debate back and forth about whether or not Trump's a racist and whatever crazy things he says one day to the next. As a result, I think that a lot of people sort of ignore it and go on about their lives, and they'll think about it more when they come to election time. I think that perception about President Trump being less friendly to minorities is certainly pretty well burned in and will be something that he'll have to struggle with as he tries to get reelected next fall.
And does it have a longer-term implication for the party as a whole?
Yeah, I think that the Republican Party has changed dramatically under President Trump as Republicans have tried to rationalize their support for him in terms of their preference for a Republican, any Republican, over the Democratic alternative. And the result is that the party's sort of policy moorings have come unglued and have shifted away from what has been the focus of the Republican Party. And it's making it a party that's much less desirable for people who are sort of more independent voters to support.
Taylor Griffin, thank you. Well, there was initially an awkward silence from the Republican Party in reaction to those tweets, but there has now been a trickle of condemnation. The black Republican Congressman Will Hurd, speaking to CNN about Donald Trump's comments, was very critical.
I think those tweets are racist and xenophobic. They're also inaccurate, right? The 4 women he's referring to are actually citizens of the United States. 3 of the 4 were born here. It's also behavior that's unbecoming of the leader of the free world. You should be talking about things that unite us, not divides us.
Jeff Flake is a former Republican senator for Arizona. He was one of President Trump's most outspoken critics among Republican politicians before he retired at the end of the last Congress. In a tweet today, he said it was incumbent for elected Republicans to respond to and condemn President Trump's latest comments. I asked him why he decided to make his views known.
To say, basically, go back to where you came from, that message for immigrants in all countries is really offensive, and I thought it was here.
And does it go as far as being racist?
I'm not going to characterize it that way. I just don't think that attaching that label helps.
Very few Republicans have come out to condemn these comments. Why do you think that is?
Well, we're getting close to election season. The Republican Party wants to be united. And I think the Republican leadership, as soon as they respond, they feel that challengers or incumbents who face a tough challenge, would have to respond to that response, and they just don't want to get into it. I understand that impulse, and I've said all along, Republican elected officials shouldn't have to respond to every comment made by the president. Take virtually all your time. However, when he goes so far beyond the mark, and with comments like this, that there is the risk of it becoming normalized, then it's incumbent on Republican elected officials, and particularly the leadership, to stand up and say something. And I'm disappointed they haven't yet.
So is that silence simply about electoral tactics, a realization that perhaps this plays well with a political base, a Trump political base?
I doubt that there are many thinking that, this will play to our benefit. They just want to see it go by and not have to comment on it. But to me, it's kind of in the category of when the president is called the best people, to use a phrase that has such an ignoble pedigree. When there's silence there, I think we've seen now when the president says it, people just pass it on. And that's a problem which journalists around the world say that's normalized. They say, well, yeah, we accept that, and it shouldn't be accepted. And I think this falls into that category. Use that phrase for actually
You know that by hesitating to call these comments offensive, you won't call them racist. Isn't that part and parcel of this normalization, this unwillingness perhaps to tell it like it is?
I just don't